one summer during college, my friend Demetrius and I, Demi we called him, we got a job working for Comcast, or a company that contracted to Comcast. We wanted some spending money, so we were willing to do this day labor thing. They hired us on the phone and put us to work the next morning as soon as we arrived. We didn't know what we were getting a job doing, but we soon found out that we would be digging the trenches so that they could lay the Comcast cable. The guy that hired us and handed us our shovels and put us to work said he was a Marine and that he had been a drill sergeant. And although he was amiable when he hired us, he started yelling and screaming at everyone, really, as soon as we began work. He had been a drill sergeant and was still in that mode, and that's how he was getting things done. Now, I was none too happy about this and thought about using that shovel he had handed me in other ways, but he was older and bigger than I was, so I resisted. But when Demi and I went to lunch, we invented a new slogan, QAL, quit at lunch. There was no way that I was going to go back and work there. Demi was a little more reticent to quit than I was, but he was unhappy as well, and I convinced him that we could get another job that day, and we did. We went to see a friend of ours, Mike Smyrna, who had also been a Marine, in fact, and owned a company. Mike owned a successful moving and transport company, and he also refinished furniture. He had a little store that acted as both the office for the transport company and provided a warehouse within which he refinished furniture, or he had people refinish furniture, and he worked in it as well. Mike was passionate about furnishings, about furniture, and he knew his stuff. And he was passionate about hard work and doing a good job for people. You know, most of the guys that he hired were like we were friends of his. And he was a little older than us, and he had even hung out with an even rougher crowd in high school. And he hired all of the wild boys from the area. But he was able to be successful because he got this wild crew to do quality work. You know, Mike was so into the furniture and providing quality work and succeeding in business that we would get jobs that other companies would turn down. We moved houses and delivered for companies like Bloomingdale's and smaller boutique home furnishing stores, and did the refinishing as well. And we would get jobs that other companies would turn down, or at least would not get, because they would have to tell the customers that they weren't going to be able to do some of the work. This was the very late 80s, and it was a period of time when jumbo oversized furnishings were all the rage. There's a store called Domain that had these giant sofas, giant oversized sofas, and everybody had an enormous armoire. TV still had tubes in them, so if you had a big screen, you had a big giant TV, and you put it in your armoire, and the armoires would often have to get to the bedroom, and these companies couldn't get them up there. But we took such great pride in our ability to do what others couldn't, that we would get, Mike really had a fantastic client list. He would keep this 3-ring binder of all of their testimonials. And we moved homes in the wealthiest parts of Virginia and Maryland, Great Falls and Potomac. You'd often find this group of ruffians going into 8-figure homes and leaving with massive tips and referrals and testimonials, because we were working magic with these giant pieces and getting them upstairs and into people's bedrooms and other places. And the business back in the warehouse did well also, because Mike would share with the workers his knowledge about fine furnishings. I mean, Mike and I went into business, invested in some real estate later in life, and I acquired some pieces from him. He taught me about French provincial furniture, and I acquired a French provincial sofa from him and a couple of other pieces. And while we were working, he was teaching people about the wood, about the furniture, about its construction. And we were taking part in taking these old pieces that had sometimes been beaten up and left in a barn and painted, and turning them into, gorgeous refinished furnishings. George W. Bush famously said on a number of occasions, he joked that it would be easier to be a dictator. And on the surface, it certainly does seem that way. Trying to govern in a democracy is a very difficult thing because, of course, everyone has their say. And this is why organizations are far more dictatorships than democracies. Now, that word comes with negative connotations, but in the organizational world, you have a hierarchy. One person tells other people what to do, and they do it. And people will argue, I can't accept leaders. I can't accept, a whole bunch of input from the workers. I can't run this like a democracy because I never get anything done. I have to be able to tell people what to do and have them do it. And I understand that. I sympathize. But when people are more dictatorial, workers don't dig it. I mean, adults don't want to be, nobody does, but adults, least of all, want to be told what to do. And they certainly don't want to be talked to in a way that they think is in any way disrespectful or derogatory. And that's what most workers feel. 7 out of 10 are disengaged. I spoke to a CEO once he was atop everything. He had to touch everything. And he did so because he cared about his business. But everything was done at his direction. There really wasn't any entrepreneurship coming from the staff. There wasn't any ownership. And yet he would complain, why don't the workers have more ownership in what they're doing? Why aren't they more engaged? Why isn't this more a collaborative effort? You can understand the psychology of a leader not wanting to run a more collaborative and democratic business. They have to get things done. But when workers are told what to do and they're not encouraged to collaborate, to be entrepreneurial, to engage. They're not encouraged to inject themselves, their ownership into the work. It's difficult to get what you want out of the best, much less a group of ruffians like Mike had working for him. But when you do encourage investment, engagement, ownership, entrepreneurship, you get a very different thing. Mike really worked magic with this group. Me and Demi were a little rough, but Mike had some even rougher friends. If he had not injected this spirit of ownership into this group, God knows what would have happened at these, $20 million homes. And to the people's furniture when we took care of it, refinished it. I have put together a leadership methodology, and it has 5 principles. And the 5th I call collaboration, not direction. And I get a lot of pushback from owners because collaboration, it seems to them, slows things down. But I'm often brought in because they spend all of their time trying to clean up what results when it's not a collaborative effort, when people aren't encouraged to engage and inject their ownership. Human beings don't like to be controlled, and managers, leaders, business owners only have so much control. You think that you're telling someone what to do, and most of the time the worker does do it. But if they're not leaning in, if they don't feel some ownership, if they're not down, if they're not engaged, if they don't think that they've chosen to some degree to do this or to do it in their way, or for whatever reason they're not collaborating with you, you end up spending all your time cleaning that up. Because ultimately, every worker has a choice. Now, they need the paycheck, so they're going to do what you tell them to do, but they're going to do it, if they don't want to do it, in a way that makes clear they didn't want to do it. It really is collaboration, or you're going to have to be directing not only the doing, but the repair, the cleanup. I mean, I've said it before, and I'll continue to say it. I don't get paid as a consultant to recommend things that are morally good, that are nice for the purpose of being nice. I don't recommend treating people with respect and seeking their input and their engagement because it's the right thing to do. I do it because it's the most effective way to get the worker engagement, the productivity, and the quality of work that you want. And this company thought that they were doing the right thing when they employed this drill sergeant to yell and scream at everybody. And they could come out and they could see his dictatorial ways resulting in guys working. But they had this massive turnover, and that ended up being even more costly. Mike was engaging people who made mistake after mistake and were kind of rough sometimes to begin with. And yet he got them to lean in and give their best because of what he engendered in them, because of the passion that he brought and wanted to share. He was collaborative by nature, largely because of this passion. But it's infectious. And it's infectious because it said to us, you matter. And it showed us what you're doing matters. You can have an impact on this, such that when you're done, you'll look back and that work will be a reflection of you. And when people recognize that, they want whatever they've done to be a good reflection on them. And that's what we saw. We saw in the work. And so we were conscientious. We were hardworking. We provided quality service, whether it was delivering a piece, moving a home, or refinishing a expensive piece of furniture. And this is true for every leader and every worker. Either you're going to collaborate such that people invest and see themselves in the work, or your dictatorship is going to run into trouble. Collaboration, not direction. That's the principle.